Okay, so have you ever noticed how some people, like even the really smart ones, can be kind of clueless about money? Let's dive into The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And, well, it really unpacks why that is.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? This book, it's not your typical financial advice, do this, don't do that kind of thing.
Right.
It's more about, like, the strange ways our minds work when it comes to money. And it uses these really interesting stories and historical examples to get his point across.
It's true. It's fascinating. Like the author, he talks about this tech whiz he knew. This guy designed some crucial Wi-Fi component when he was like in his 20s, started companies, the whole nine yards.
Wow.
So you'd expect him to be a financial genius, right? But then the author sees this guy flashing wads of cash, almost bragging about it. It's kind of like, why would someone so successful feel the need to do that?
It's a great example of what the book really digs into. Financial mastery,
Hmm.
it's not just about being good with numbers.
Hmm.
This tech guy, he understood algorithms and code, not the psychology of wealth. That kind of showing off often comes from insecurity, a need for validation. It reminds us that we all bring our own baggage to financial decisions. Past experiences, our hang-ups, all of it.
That's such a good point. And it kind of leads into this bigger idea from the book. What sounds crazy financially to you might make perfect sense to someone else, right?
Totally.
Because it's all about our own individual experiences.
Absolutely. Like, imagine someone who lived through the 1970s,
Right.
right, when inflation was just out of control.
Yeah.
They're going to view things like bonds very differently than, say, someone who's only ever known, like, stable prices.
Right.
Their experience, what they've lived through, it shapes their whole idea of risk and reward.
Totally. It reminds me of that example from the book about John F. Kennedy. Did you know that during his campaign, his lack of firsthand experience with the Great Depression, it actually became a big issue for voters?
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were skeptical because he hadn't personally gone through it.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It shows how much weight we put on personal experience when we're talking about something as important as the economy.
Absolutely.
Like if someone hasn't walked through those fires themselves, can we trust them to lead us through them? It makes you think.
It really does. And this whole thing about personal experience, it ties into another big idea in the book: luck.
Yeah.
It's easy to look at someone like Bill Gates and think, wow, this guy, he's a genius.
Right.
But the book points out that Bill Gates just happened to attend one of the only high schools at the time that actually had a computer.
Wow.
So what if he'd gone to a different school? Would he still be Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft?
That's a really interesting question, isn't it?
It is. It makes you realize that this one lucky break, it played a huge role in his path, and it
Mm,
really highlights how much luck can factor into anyone's success. Now, that's not to say that hard work doesn't matter, but
of course, yeah.
we often underestimate the role of plain old chance.
Totally. It's like effort, hard work, those are crucial. But sometimes you also need to be in the right place at the right time. But the book doesn't just focus on luck, does it?
Yeah.
There's also this big emphasis on taking risks.
Right,
It's
right.
about finding that balance,
Yeah.
you know. Acknowledging the role of luck keeps us humble, but it shouldn't paralyze us from taking risks.
Right.
Because without some risk, there's rarely a reward.
It's like they say, the harder I work, the luckier I get. You got to put yourself out there to even be in the running for some of those lucky breaks.
Exactly.
But speaking of things that, take time, the book dives into the power of compounding. And not just like getting those amazing returns, but the importance of letting even decent returns compound for years and years.
Yeah. And the book talks about Warren Buffett, right? He's like the poster child for this.
Right, right.
A massive chunk of his wealth. It wasn't made overnight. It was generated after he turned 50.
Really?
Think about that. That's decades of compounding.
Wow, that's wild. It's like the opposite of those get-rich-quick schemes, right?
Yeah.
It's about consistency and patience, that slow and steady growth.
Absolutely.
So what do you think? What's a small step our listeners could take, maybe even today, to kind of embrace that long-term thinking when it comes to their own finances?
Yeah, even just starting small, setting aside a little bit each week or each month consistently, it really adds up over time.
It's like that saying, plant a tree today, enjoy the shade later, but with money, right?
Exactly. You're
Yeah.
planting those financial seeds early.
Definitely. Speaking of long-term thinking, there's this concept from the book that really resonated with me. Getting the goalpost to stop moving. It's so easy to fall into that trap of, okay, I got a raise, now I need a bigger house. Or now I can afford that fancy vacation, but where does it end?
It's like we're on this treadmill, constantly chasing after the next thing,
Yeah.
never quite feeling satisfied. The book makes this point. True financial success isn't about constantly needing to upgrade your lifestyle. It's about finding that contentment, that peace
Yeah.
at every level.
So true. But that's tough, especially in a world that's constantly telling us we need more, more, more.
It is. It's a challenge for sure.
There's this analogy in the book that I found really helpful. It's the idea that saving money is like energy wealth. Can you talk about that a bit?
Oh, yeah. Think of it like this. When we become more energy efficient, we don't need to consume as much energy, right?
Right.
It's the same with our finances. When we learn to be content with less, with what we actually need, we don't have to constantly be chasing after more money to feel financially secure. It's a really liberating way to think about it.
It really is. It's about having enough, not about chasing some arbitrary number. And it kind of brings it back to what we can actually control, right? We can't always control what the stock market does, but we can control how much we're saving and how much we're spending.
Exactly. It's about being proactive, building that financial buffer, that safety net,
Right.
so you're not constantly stressed or worried about money. And this kind of leads into another important idea from the book, room for error.
Ah, yes. I
Right.
love that concept. It's like that analogy with the blackjack player, right? Even the best card counters in the world, they know they can't win every single hand.
Exactly.
They need a strategy that accounts for potential losses.
They have to factor that in.
Yeah.
And just like that card counter, investors, they need to build in some room for error in their financial plans.
Yeah.
Expect the unexpected. The book even talks about Bill Gates doing this in the early days of Microsoft.
Wait, really? What did he do?
So even when Microsoft was just starting up, he always made sure to keep enough cash on hand to cover a full year of payroll, just in case.
Wow. Talk about planning ahead.
Right. That's room for error in action. He knew things might not always go perfectly, and he wanted to be prepared.
That's a great example. It shows that risk-taking isn't just about being bold. It's also about being prepared for those moments when things might not go your way.
Absolutely. And all of this, it ties back to one of the core themes of the book. Aim for reasonable, not perfectly rational, financial decisions.
Meaning?
Well, we have to remember that we're human, right? Emotions are always going to play a role in our choices, even our financial ones.
Right. It's not about trying to be a robot, completely remove emotions from the equation.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Creating a plan that makes sense financially, but also feels livable, realistic for our human nature.
Right. Something we can actually stick with long term. It's like setting ourselves up for success, both financially and emotionally. One of the things that really fascinated me in the book was how it talked about the stories we tell ourselves about the economy. Can we dive into that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the psychology aspect really comes into play.
Right.
The book uses the 2009 economic downturn as an example, remember. Back then, America, in terms of capacity for wealth, it was practically the same as it was in 2007.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that close together.
Yeah, just 2 years prior.
So what happened? If things were so similar, why the big downturn?
The narrative changed. Fear took over.
Yeah.
People, businesses, they started acting on those fears. And it created this self-fulfilling prophecy. The economy tanked. But it all stemmed from the stories, the narratives that we were telling ourselves about the situation.
That's incredible. So even if objectively the underlying reality hasn't drastically changed,
Right.
our perception of it, how we view it, that can have this huge ripple effect.
It can become our reality. And that's why the book argues that, while pessimism, it might sound smarter.
Right, yeah.
It often feels more grounded, right?
Certainly.
But optimism, it tends to win out in the long run.
So it's better to be a hopeful fool than a cynical genius.
Not exactly foolish, but it's about recognizing that progress, a lot of times, it's slow and steady. It's not always obvious or flashy. If we only focus on the negative, the risks, the potential downsides, we might miss the positive trends that are emerging. Remember that example from the book about peak horse manure?
Oh, yeah. That was a good one.
People back then, they were genuinely worried that the world would be buried in horse manure because at the time it was the primary fertilizer, right?
Right.
They had no way of foreseeing the automobile.
And how that would change everything.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that we're not very good at predicting the future. Sometimes the things we're most afraid of never actually happen, and opportunities pop up from these unexpected places.
It's about being open to possibilities rather than getting bogged down by those what-if fears.
Exactly. And that actually ties into another important point about volatility in the market. The book says that we should think of volatility not as a fine, but as a price of admission.
What does that mean?
Well, think about it. You wouldn't expect to just walk into Disneyland and enjoy all the rides for free, right? You pay for a ticket. Volatility, it's like the entry fee for participating in the stock market. You pay it for the chance to experience those potential rewards of investing.
So instead of being afraid of the ups and downs, the volatility,
Yes,
we should almost view it as an inherent part of the journey.
exactly. It's part of the deal.
It's the cost of potentially higher returns over the long run.
Exactly. It's all about perspective.
It really is. It's about shifting our perspective, right?
Mm,
Volatility isn't necessarily this bad thing to be feared. It's just like part of the game.
exactly. It's just part of the journey when you're aiming for those long-term gains.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like we've covered so much ground, from the psychology of wealth and risk to, the power of compounding, and even those stories, those narratives we tell ourselves about money. But before we wrap up, I'm curious, for our listeners, what's the key takeaway? How can they actually use these insights from the psychology of money in their own lives?
That's the big question, right? I think one of the most important takeaways from this book is that, it's not enough to just understand the mechanics of investing.
Right.
It's about aligning those financial decisions with you, with your own psychology, your own values.
So it's about self-awareness as much as it is about like financial knowledge.
100%. And the book, it really drives this point home through all these stories of, both successes and failures. Like, remember Jesse Livermore?
Oh, yeah, the legendary stock trader, early 1900s, right?
That's him. He made and lost a fortune several times over.
It's kind of crazy, his story.
It is, because he was clearly brilliant.
Yeah.
This guy could read the market like nobody's business.
Yeah.
But his own psychology, like his tendency to get overconfident, to take these huge risks,
Right.
it ultimately led to his downfall.
Mm.
And it's a good reminder for all of us that even the smartest people out there, they can sabotage themselves if they don't really understand their own relationship with money.
Totally. It's like sometimes we really are our own worst enemy.
You got it. The book also talks about this other guy, Abraham Jermansky, a real estate investor who lost everything in the 1929 crash. And it's amazing, right? Two people can go through almost the exact same event.
But have totally different outcomes.
Exactly. And it all comes down to their choices,
Mhm.
how they react, And I think that's a huge part of it. Being able to manage your emotions, even when the market gets crazy.
So true. So true.
The psychology of money, it reminds us that financial success is not some magic formula.
Right.
It's not just about intelligence or some brilliant strategy. It's about your temperament. It's about having the patience and the discipline to stick with your plan even when things get tough.
It's about weathering the storm, right?
Exactly.
And even more than that, it's about actually being okay with the fact that storms are going to come.
You got it. You got it. It's not just about surviving. It's about enduring.
I love that. Speaking of different approaches, there's this one idea I found really interesting, the whole barbell personality for investing. Can you explain that a bit?
Oh, yeah. That's a great one. So picture a barbell, right? You've got weights on either end. In this case, one end of that barbell, it represents extreme optimism about the future. You're bullish. You see those opportunities everywhere.
Okay, yeah.
But then on the other end, you've got this healthy dose of paranoia. Like, what could go wrong? You're prepared for those potential downsides.
So it's like, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Yes.
Exactly. You're excited about the possibilities, but you're not naive to the risks, right? You've got a plan that can handle those different scenarios.
It makes sense. You're giving yourself the freedom to think big, but you're also, you're building in that security so you're not completely blindsided when something goes wrong.
That's it. That's the barbell personality in action.
I love it. Well, as we wrap up here, this whole conversation has really gotten me thinking, It's not just about picking the right stocks or bonds. It's about really taking that hard look inward, understanding your own motivations, your own behavior, your own psychology when it comes to money.
That's the real power of this book, wouldn't you say? It encourages us to ask ourselves some tough questions. What are my values? What do I really want? What truly matters?
Such important questions.
Right. Because when you can start aligning your financial decisions with those core values, that's when things really start to click.
Absolutely. And it makes you realize that at the end of the day, it's not just about how much money we have, right?
It's about how we use that money to build the life that we want.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about finding that sweet spot, that balance, where your financial strategy is actually supporting your life goals, not the other way around.
This deep dive into the psychology of money has been amazing. I always learn so much from these conversations. But if you had to pick, just one thing, one big takeaway for our listeners to really remember, what would it be?
If I had to choose just one, it would be this. Take the time. Really understand your own relationship with money.
Yeah.
Explore that financial psychology. Because, once you understand the why behind your decisions, the how becomes so much clearer.
That is fantastic advice. The Psychology of Money, it really is a must read for anyone who wants to, not just improve their finances, but really gain a better understanding of themselves in the process. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure, as always.
It's always so much fun to chat about this stuff, especially with you. Until next time.